Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Four Guys Roundtable Show with my podcast cohorts, Coach Jeremy, AJ Nitro, Darth Pat, and me, just Theo. Austin Powers, really? We're going that soon, Darth Pat? Austin Powers?
I'm trying to mix it up a little. Give me a break.
I mean, if you want to go to that side, we could definitely go that way. We could bring out the English accent.
I wasn't doing an English accent. My God, open your ears, man.
Never mind.
It's gonna be a long night.
Oh,
Never mind.
This short, damn it.
If we're talking
Darth
about
Pat
short,
might fall
we have
asleep.
something else that might be short, but it's not going to be this podcast.
Jesus.
Really quick. Great.
Oh, and then with that, we put Darth Pat to sleep. Okay. All right.
How's everyone doing this evening?
Doing great. I was sitting out by my campfire today. Well, not my campfire, but my fire pit with a nice fire going. It was a little smoky today. I don't know why. I couldn't figure out why we had so much smoke. Because the wood is definitely not wet, so it wasn't like I was burning out the wet out of the wood. So it was a little weird. But, it is what it is.
Two of us were watching SummerSlam this evening.
Yes.
SummerSlam. Can't say I've watched that in a while.
It was okay for the most part.
It was last year.
It was yeah. I thought it was going to be a train wreck. It wasn't a train wreck, so it was like, oh, it was there. It happened. It wasn't anything memorable that 5 years from now I'm probably going to remember.
Well, what I mean is I don't think I watched it last year either. I don't think I've watched SummerSlam the last 2 years.
I think that Pat McAfee last night was the coolest thing this weekend. He surprised everybody.
Well, do tell.
Yes. He probably had the best celebrity performance of all time in their first wrestling match. Like, legitimately.
Him and Cole arguably was the best match last night at the TakeOver.
Pretty much.
So he evidently was training?
Clearly.
Yeah, he's definitely had some training. He's probably done more than what that we really know about, to be honest.
Cool.
Pat, what were you going to say, Darth Pat?
I was asking if McAfee did, because when he said that it was like the best first-time performance, I said, did he do better than LT?
Of course.
Yes, he did.
The fridge?
I mean, I figured the answer was yes, but I was just curious.
I mean, he did a really cool flip off the ropes and then ran back and jumped up onto the ropes. Like he showed a lot of agility and just it was one of those things where I don't think anybody's the tagline for SummerSlam tonight was "You won't see it coming." I feel like Pat McAfee last night fit that better than other than Roman coming back tonight. That was the only thing I didn't see coming tonight.
Are they trying to steal a tagline from me? Mine was "Throw it in your face." Are they trying to? Is that why they can't see it coming? I wonder.
Shit.
When I hear that now, for whatever reason, I always think of the trailers for Iron Man 3. I think it was because I remember Ben Kingsley as spoiler alert. Ben Kingsley as, the fake Mandarin in the Iron Man 3 trailer. It's like when they were showing his TV broadcasts, he was saying something I think "You'll never see me coming." So I hear somebody use that phrase, it makes me think of that. Why? I don't know. It just does. So
I mean,
one of those things.
The Thunderdome concept is fine. I don't think it's. I mean, it's better. I think it's better than having fans there. I think it's safer. So
They stole it from the NBA.
It's definitely safer than having fans. I don't know that there's anything overly special about it. I mean,
no,
it's like okay, whatever. I'll tell you what it is better than, though. Even though this is not a direct comparison by any means, it's better than Fox on their Saturday baseball broadcasts putting in CGI fake fans.
I know, it's horrible.
So you see a home run get hit, you see the ball, sailing into the stands, and it just sails into this computer-generated sea of fans who are all just standing around like.
It looks like a video game. Like they put video game fans in the stands for the
It's
Fox
like-
broadcast. It's
but
horrible.
But it's like they're not reacting to what happened. So it's and when the Red Sox played the Yankees, I guess that was last weekend. Now I don't really remember already. This whole month's been a blur for me for some reasons. But like they had like Red Sox fans in like a part of like the right field seats in Yankee Stadium where there wouldn't be any Red Sox fans. Trust me. So that just looks stupid. So I'll say that the Thunderdome thing, because at least you know it's just people like on screens or whatever. It's not as distracting as that like blatant just like CGI shit is.
Are we watching MLB the Show, or are we watching a real baseball game?
Well, I have to tell you, there was something really funny that I saw with the NBA, and that was they had I'm gonna forget his name, freaking Lil Wayne. They had Lil Wayne CGI into a game, sitting next to another fan, and he's like trying to get the person's attention through the whatever, I guess, app or whatever that uses to do that.
Yeah,
to do a high five.
Yeah, I saw that. I think Lil Wayne was also like smoking while he was on there. There's like puffs of smoke that were showing up.
I'm sure they were thrilled to have that on camera. I mean.
I think Steph and his dad today. I think the Currys were like on one of them, like at one of the games today, like virtually.
Game.
Which speaking of the Dallas game, I saw probably one of the funniest flops ever. That was because they were, of course, who was talking about it? It was I can't think of his name because I don't hear him announce very often. But he was talking about the fact that the one dude from Dallas pushed down the guy from the Clippers and then told him to stop flopping, you big man. And then the dude got up in his face. Why can't I think of the guy's name? Because I think he was a big guy, too. I just can't.
Van Gundy and I think Mark Jackson were announcing the game today.
Were they? It was so they must have. But it must have been somebody analyzing the play then from one of the sports stations. Somebody mentioned who it was, and I can't remember who it was though. But it was pretty funny to see. And I can't think of his name from Dallas because I don't know anybody on Dallas at this point in time.
It was today's game, right? You're talking about?
No, it was. I think it was either yesterday or the day before.
It would have been the day before then.
There was an incident today's game with the Clippers with Luka and one of the guys from the Clippers. So, like Luka got the ball and there was like I forget what happened. He turned around and he just grazed the guy from the Clippers, and the guy just kind of like just fell down and like did like a half-ass flop. It wasn't as bad, it wasn't the great LeBron James flops, but it was close enough. And like he turned around and he started talking shit to the guy about flopping. So there was a little argument going back and forth. But I watched that game. Started watching in the fourth quarter and the OT game. That was a fun game to watch today.
I turned it off because I wanted the Clippers to win because I hate Dallas. So.
Well, and that's fine. But yeah, it was. But it was Luka. It was because he's got that really long name, right? Doesn't he? Like,
yeah. Well, there's Porzingis too.
Porzingis is the other one.
Porzingis. Maybe it was Porzingis then. Because,
I think Porzingis was the one that was in the other game that had issues with like the flopping.
Yeah, it was Porzingis. I think that might have
been him.
Because he went up for a rebound on a missed shot. The ball flew out of his hands and went into one of the Dallas guys, and he went to turn around. He turned around and like kind of put his arm out to like kind of clear his way so he wouldn't like trip over the dude, and the dude just belly flopped forward, like took a dive forward, and then he turns around, he's like, "Stop flopping, big man," and the guy gets up, he's like, "Arr!" Like, well, if you got pushed down that hard, you probably wouldn't get up that fast, I'm thinking, but
I think the Eastern Conference semifinals are going to be really good because I think Boston, Toronto, and Miami are all really dangerous.
Yeah, I mean they have other players showing up to play the game, for the most part. I mean Kemba, they swept today, right? Today they swept. Kemba had a good game today.
They swept, and Toronto scored 150 points today and swept New Jersey.
What the hell? 150 points? It's not even a basketball game anymore. Like what?
So
Jersey has not played very well since the start, and even though they made the playoffs, their defense is horrible right now.
Right.
So
Well, see, and there's a problem with the NBA. They wanted to give so many teams a chance to be in the playoffs to make it more exciting. But was it really worth putting all those teams in if you're going to get that kind of crappy of a game with 150 points scored? Like that's not that other team didn't even show up to play. Like they just had the bench players play the entire game. What the
they
hell?
just went through the motions, pretty much.
You know,
I thought New Jersey had a ton of injured guys too, though.
I mean, Kyrie's not playing, of course, and neither is Durant. So they do have like two guys.
Even besides that, I think like before they were ready to restart, I think I had when I had the New York radio station, The Fan, on one day, the guys who were on in the afternoon, I think we're talking about how it was kind of absurd for the Nets to even be going because it was like those guys were out and like somebody had to sit out because of like an illness or I don't know if it was COVID or it was something. I don't remember. I just remember hearing things about where they were even saying like they're going to be fielding like almost like a G League team. So.
I think two guys were injured and one of them had to sit out because of COVID for a while.
But they were the 7. I mean, they were the 7 seed, so they made the playoffs because they were the 7 seed. I mean, they were under 500. So, but that's the East most years. Like teams under 500 make the postseason in the East. That's how it's been this whole last decade.
Yeah, and that just tells you that they maybe need to change things and maybe I mean, I know we don't go backwards, but it might be more beneficial to the playoffs to narrow
I think they need
top 8, top 6.
They need to rank them. They just need to rank the teams 1 to 16, not break them up into the East and the West. I think that's coming eventually, where they're just going to be 1 to 16.
Yeah, because that was in the talks. They were
talking about that. Yeah,
using that for this playoffs.
Yeah,
but for some reason it went by the wayside, and they
so
decided
maybe
to go 8 and 8.
That's coming.
They do need to do that.
That's coming. The 1 through 16 is coming in the next, like, depending on if we go back to normal or what the season's like. That's supposed to be coming in the NBA. So
and you know what? That's better because I mean, even if you go back to the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, there was always somewhere where there was weak teams and they shouldn't have been making the playoffs. Like not just weak, like you shouldn't be in the playoffs. You're just that bad of a team.
I think 11 teams from the West would have made it and 5 teams from the East if they would have done the 1 to 16 this year. So,
yeah. And I think that's fair because it makes the playoffs more enjoyable to watch because you're going to have better games. Like, and that's what the playoffs should be. They should be better games. They should be tougher series for everybody, not just, the 4 and 5 and the 6 and 7 seed. Those teams shouldn't have the toughest. It should be tough for everybody.
One thing I was kind of thinking about for a playoff format is, you had the top 7 teams in each conference automatically make the playoffs. And then you have the 8 and 9 seeds in each conference play
best of 3,
maybe a 2 out of 3 to see who gets the 8 seed. And then once that happens, or you could do this, you could the top 7 for each one, and then you rank them from 1 through 14. And then the other 4 teams, the 8 and the 9s from each one, play to get the 15 and 16 spots, and whoever has the best record out of those 2 winning teams gets 15, and the loser gets 16.
They did the playing game in the West this year, so they did that in the West this year. They didn't do it in the East. So,
but it'd be better if they,
I like that, Joe. I like that.
Something different.
Well, one thing they're definitely not going to do is contract the size of the playoffs. That you can totally forget about. That'll never happen.
Well, if anything, they're gonna expand it before they do it. If anything, more money.
Yeah, they really shouldn't expand it though because you already have half the league making the playoffs. I mean, it's like you got a 30 team league. I think 16 is just fine for the playoffs. Yeah. I mean, this year was this year, so. But you can't really expand it more than 16. It's just more. It's also really just like if baseball is able to play a 162 game season next season, the playoff format that they're going to be using this year cannot be used next year because what the fuck's the point of playing 162 regular season games if you're still going to have that many teams make the playoffs?
Get rid of 10 games.
Yeah,
they could conceivably do that, but they have a lot of other issues that they need to worry out that we've talked about before they do that if you ask me. I mean, I think it's easier just for next season, assuming again that they can do that, to just go back to the playoff system we've had for the last 25 years with not the last 25 years, the last 5 or 6 years since they did the second wild card.
I don't like the play in the one-off playing games. That's the one thing I don't like. If you're gonna I'd like a 2 out of 3. I don't like the one game take it all type of thing.
I agree with Joe. I'm not a big fan of that either.
I'm not a big fan. There's it's like one opportunity and you can get stuck with a pitcher. Those teams have to really screw around and mess around with their pitching rotation to even get a good chance of winning that playing game. And it's just kind of like give them more of the teams an equal opportunity, because one team is definitely going to be better off. I've already seen that before. You guys have your fourth starter playing in a play-in game, and you have to like pray to God that he at least goes 6 innings for you to have a chance of winning and not give up too many goddamn runs.
Well, yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Joe.
The reason why I think they did it the way they did it when they instituted the second wild card was because there had been a bunch of wild card teams that had been able to win a World Series. I mean, just for reference sake, now Miami Marlins have 2 World Series championships and 0 National League East Division championships. So I think what it was I think it was not necessarily trying to say punish the wild card teams by making them play a 1-game playoff, but putting more of an incentive, of course, on winning the division. I think that's what they were really trying to do with game playoff. I'm not the biggest fan of it too. I mean, the Yankees have been on the losing end of it one time, so obviously I didn't like it then. Didn't really have any problems with it the other 2 times. They won it. But, that's, again, I think what they did. They were really trying to say, hey, win your division, Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing that I think we could probably all agree on. As the leagues have expanded, which is always nice because more cities get a team, there's more money going around as far as the league goes, which is always great for the, stations and the owners and everything like that. The problem is that as you add more teams, you get less and less good players on a single team. And free agency, of course, does not help that. But, I mean, you look at basketball. As basketball's expanded, you have some really garbage teams out there because they can't, as good as some of the college players are, and AJ knows this probably better than any of us, college players do not always equate to a good NBA player.
No, especially when they go out after a year and they're not ready.
So the league in the NBA is probably the best example. The league in the NBA is so watered down because there is such little talent out there as far as to be able to build a team around. Like, not every team has a superstar. Some teams have like no superstars, and they're just, they got 5 players and maybe a 6th on the bench that can play, but they're not superstars. They're not going to make the playoffs. They're like, oh, we're rebuilding again. Well, you've been rebuilding for the last 10 years. That's not rebuilding. That's like floating, almost drowning as far as a team goes.
I think the Hornets probably are the best example of that in the NBA right now. Would you agree, Joe?
Yeah, for the most part. There's other teams too, but yeah. Yeah.
They don't really have like Atlanta has Trae Young though. Like I think that the Hornets don't have like that one like standout player right now. Like that you can say, at least they have him. I think all the other teams at least have one guy. I think Charlotte's the team that doesn't really have that one household name superstar on their team.
They did, but he went to Boston.
Yes. They did. Sad. You're right.
And it's sad because when I was actually paying attention to basketball, really paying attention and watching it, the Charlotte Hornets had Larry Johnson. They had Muggsy Bogues.
And Alonzo Mourning.
And Alonzo Mourning at one point in time, yeah. So they had a really good team. But if I remember correctly, didn't their franchise went away and became the New Orleans Pelicans or something like that, and then they came back to Charlotte or some shit like that. I know they went away for a while and came back. I just don't remember where they went to and then came back again.
Yeah, they left Charlotte, went to New Orleans, the Hornets, and then they renamed it the Pelicans, and then Charlotte got their franchise back a couple years later or something like that.
Okay, so I was right with that, just didn't have the name crossed out yet.
They were called the Bobcats at first, and then they...
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
God. The Hornets.
Yeah. All right. So, got a little story for you. So this story is I'm gonna give you the phrase it like this: fireworks are dangerous, people. So, my brother-in-law wanted to set off some fireworks for the kids over this weekend while we were up there visiting, and because normally we do our annual camping trip because everything's closed down of COVID and everything like that, as we know, we just kind of did it at their house for like a day, 2 days technically. And so the other day was firework day, and he got out one of these. I think it was called the Lion King, is what it was called, which is kind of like those little missile ones that shoot off. And yeah, let's just say that did not go so well. It fell over and started shooting after it had already been lit. Of course, he lit it, started shooting, it fell over, and then it started shooting everywhere. He got grazed twice, once near his ear and then once on his foot, and scared the crap out of my 10-year-old nephew because he was right there with his dad, because he's like, oh, my dad, most kids think, hang around my dad, it's safe, no problem.
Yeah.
Which normally that is, factual for him, and except for this firework incident. So, yeah. Luckily, there was a golf cart. They don't have a golf cart for, when they go camping, because they do a lot of camping. They drive around the campgrounds. Luckily, they hid behind the golf cart and were saved by the golf cart, because the golf cart took a hit and blew 2 holes in the seats.
Great.
So that's what got the brunt of the damage
cart.
was the golf cart. So that's good. I'm glad it was a golf cart, not any kids. But it definitely scared the crap out of my nephew, because he came back and he's I don't want to say he's sensitive to noises, but really loud stuff like that, it really hurts his ears really bad. And being so close to it going off like that, he was like, it had him freaked out for a little while. But luckily nobody was actually badly injured, just a couple scrapes on my brother-in-law in that. And of course the first thing out of his mouth is, man, I don't think I'm going to be able to go diving, because he does scuba diving. He's like, I don't think I'm going to be able to go diving, because he can't. I guess you're not supposed to have open wounds when you go scuba diving.
Yeah, you're really not supposed to.
So, but luckily he healed over enough that he could go diving on Sunday, so he was okay. But yes, the moral of the story is fireworks are fucking dangerous, people. Leave those to the trained professionals.
It's funny how he didn't give a shit about his ear. His ear could have came off like Mick Foley. He's like, damn it, I can't go scuba diving Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, granted, he was thankful that none of the kids got hurt, but then it was like, I wanted to go scuba diving on Sunday.
Well, other than that, how did you like to play Mrs. Lincoln?
It was fantastic. The scary part for me was watching my son and his best friend, which is his cousin, my niece, sitting there watching this, and like the shit's like flying over top their heads. I was like, good God, what the like, holy shit. And hearing my sister-in-law go, move, get out of the way, move back, get out of the way. I'm like, oh my God, like what the hell is going on here?
Fireworks extravaganza.
Yeah.
Live and up close and personal.
I am very much I don't want to say anti-firework person, but might as well be that. We'll put it this way. Like you said, if it's like a professional thing, if it's like some kind of professional fireworks demonstration or whatever word you want to use, fine, great. Okay. When it's everybody who just decides, I'm gonna go buy some fireworks and set off some. God,
it's fun.
I don't mind if I hear people like that blew their hands off.
Oh, well, okay.
Jeez.
Well, you play with fire. Yeah.
Go ahead, say it, Pat. Go ahead, Darth Pat, say it. If you play with fire, you what?
You're gonna turn into Darth Vader.
Nice. All right. And with that, I think we should get started with our podcast. What do you think, Theo?
Let's get started with this topic.
All right, go ahead. What are we talking about today, Theo?
We are talking about... God damn you, why are you interrupting me?
Because it's fun. And because I can.
That's it. Where's my mute button? Sharp. Remove from call. Oh, I can remove him from the call too. Holy shit! This is
So that the ratings
sweetness.
would just go downhill.
I'll find an alternative. We are talking about the wrestling GOAT this evening. So we'll see where this leads to. Because it should be fun. Because we have very opinionated people on this panel.
That we
especially two of them. And on my screen, they're in the top two corners of the screen. Right, Darth Pat? And right, AJ. Right, yeah. We'll see how this goes.
I'm opinionated? Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Feel proud.
So, talking
Take the
about
compliment.
the wrestling GOAT, so the greatest of all time. So we're going to start off, we have three things we're going to talk about, but first we're going to start off with GOAT criteria. Now, before we get into that, of course, we must stop for a public service announcement, and that would be thank you, everybody that is tuning in, no matter where you're catching this, whether it be YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or Stitcher. We do appreciate you guys tuning in and making sure that you are, well, I don't want to say making sure, but we just want to thank you for tuning in because we do greatly appreciate it. You know, we're right here for you guys each and every week, and we hope you guys are enjoying it. If you are catching us on YouTube, though, please make sure you're giving us a big thumbs up. Give us the big thumbs up. Make sure you're setting those notifications as well as subscribing to our channel. Leave us a comment because we'd like to know what you think. Maybe you think Darth Pat is a hunka, munka, chunka, baby love, you know? And maybe you think good old AJ should stop wearing them fucking ugly ass headbands that he's got on. I don't know. But either way, we would like to know what you guys are thinking, even if you think that I should maybe stop wearing hats because maybe they make me look bad. I don't know. But anyways, leave us a comment. If you're catching us on iTunes, not Twitch, holy shit, wrong thing. If you're catching us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify, make sure you're giving us a rating so we can climb up there and get caught by more people just like yourself and get entertained. Also, catch us on Twitter at the number 4 Guys with a Z Roundtable, where you can catch some of our updates and things that are going on. And also stay tuned until the very end to catch the Mount Rushmore based on the GOAT of wrestling. Did I get everything, AJ, this time? Okay, good. Make sure I didn't miss anything.
That was a couple podcasts ago where you missed Mount Rushmore.
I know. All right, so GOAT criteria. Darth Pat, give us one thing that you feel should be in the criteria for the GOAT of wrestling, the greatest of all time.
Go over 5 minutes, I'm muting you.
One thing.
Well, one thing. I think that wrestling always has been, and to an extent always will be, a promotional game.
Okay.
So you really have to be able to talk to people into the building, as they always used to say, and probably still do. So I think you got to be able to communicate. You got to be able to cut the promo one way or the other. It doesn't really matter how you do it or how you're successful at it, so long as you can make some kind of a connection with the audience at large. That's either going to get them to want to show up to cheer you on, to vanquish the bad guy, or the way that's going to make you want to see them. The way that's going to make the audience want to see you get shit kicked out of you. So I think that's really what it takes. And I would say the best people are the people who are able to do both of those. Like that they can, they could be babyface or they could be heel. I think that there's people who can only play one side. They're just, maybe they're not quite as good. Now, maybe it's because they just have a gimmick that you could never root for. There's some people you can think of who are like that, the old foreign menace heels, basically. But I also think if there's somebody who can really only ever be a face, I think that kind of lowers it a little bit too, because I really think you should be able to kind of do it both ways. But there's precious few people I think you could ever think of who were exclusively faces in their career. The only two I can really kind of think of are like Ricky Steamboat and Tito Santana. They're like the only two guys I can never remember ever being a heel.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess maybe you could also throw Ultimate Warrior in there too, but that's also one. Yeah, that could be a manner of speaking, but also like if you ever caught him in like, pre WWF, like when he was in briefly in World Class or Mid South, he was definitely a heel, but he wasn't quite the Ultimate Warrior yet either.
When he was the Dingo Warrior.
Yeah, or when he was one of the Blade Runners when he was still
with Sting. Yeah.
So you could kind of throw that caveat in there and everything, but I just really think you have to be able to connect, because work rate's great and everything like that, but I still don't even think to this day people buy tickets, watch the TV shows, pay for merchandise because of the person's in-ring work. I think it has more to do with the way that they connect first. So
true.
I disagree with that. So.
Oh, you disagree? Okay, well, since you disagree, with that point,
I watch wrestling because
too long.
I watch wrestling because of the in-ring stuff. Like that's the most important thing to me, like hands down. Like there's there's nothing else that's even close to being as important as that is for me.
All right, so
I watch it for that.
So let me interject, okay? So let me ask you this real quick, AJ. Do you agree that mic skills are important though to be a GOAT? Okay. So you agree with that point, just not with you got to have the mic skills to be able to get you into the building to be able to watch, and more people watch for mic skills than they do for wrestling. So go ahead with your point, and I guess this will be your point on what makes somebody the GOAT. Okay, go ahead. Go.
It's the in-ring stuff. Like that's the most important thing to me. So if I was weighting this, that'd be like half.
Okay.
Of it for me. So like at least half. The other, whatever the other things, the mic skills and all that other stuff, those are going to be like 15% maybe each of those, whatever other categories. If we break it down into 5, then there would be, those other ones would all be like 15% each or 12% or whatever. So it's by far the in-ring stuff that matters the most to me. And it's pretty much always been that way. So.
Okay. Why? What makes the in-ring stuff so important, though, to you?
Because that's what the wrestling ultimately is about. It's athleticism, and that's what you're there to do. So I don't go to a basketball game to watch somebody talk shit to the other person on the court. I go to the basketball game to watch them play the game.
Right.
So wrestling ultimately comes down to the guys performing in the ring. That's what it revolves around. So everything else is just a byproduct of that to me. So.
There's just one problem there. The basketball game is not predetermined.
You're right. It still doesn't change. It still doesn't change the fact that you're going. That's what wrestling revolves around, is the athleticism and what the guys are doing in the ring. That's mostly what you're seeing is that. So you're seeing a promo here and there, but you're still predominantly. 15 years ago. Predominantly you were seeing wrestling. Now it has changed to where sometimes we do get more promos than the in-ring product. So
gonna kick it to you, Theo. So we got mic skills. Do you agree with that? It's a definite criteria for GOAT.
Yes.
Okay, and how about the in-ring? Do you agree with that too? I'm sorry, what was that? Speak up, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so what would be something else that you believe would be a criteria for a GOAT when it comes to wrestling?
Your look and your gimmick. Your gimmick has to be part of it, and part of your gimmick is selling to the fan base. So not just having a good look, but selling it to the crowd, to the fan base, because they're the ones who are ultimately going to determine how well you're going to do to a certain extent. As far as the in-ring ability, yeah, that's important as well. But the biggest thing I want to see out of your in-ring ability is how you storytell. If you can flip and do a Canadian Destroyer off the top rope, that's just an added bonus for me. If you could do crazy shit, like a lot of guys can do these days, that's just added bonus. But besides doing all the crazy stuff, I want to see you actually tell a story in the ring with other moves, other things going on. For example, so NXT Takeover, Keith Lee faced Cross, right? So there was several rest holds in there. But it's like, when you watch rest holds now, like by a lot of the big guys, it doesn't seem like they're really selling it. It's like, you see like they're grunting and like they're like not really selling it. Like if you watch a lot of 80s wrestling and like early 90s, and I'll say the whole 90s, 80s and 90s, when you're like, you see guys having long matches, or even the big guys, they have a rest hold. They're actually being, they're selling it. They're telling more of a story with the rest holds.
It doesn't just seem like it's a rest hold back then. Now it does.
Yes. Like now it's just kind of like, catch my breath. All right. Keep that headlock on. I'm just gonna squint my eyes and make it look like it fucking hurts. No, man, you're not selling it. You want to take a rest, but you're not selling it. So that's part of it. Because to be honest with you, like I agree that your in-ring product's part of it, but honestly, if you look at a lot of the guys now, everything's scripted. So you're not, for someone to fail on the mic, it's really going to be on that wrestler. They just fuck up their script or whatever the case may be. But if you can't cut a promo these days too, your in-ring wrestling ability is not going to matter as much as with the rest of your gimmick. You have a great gimmick. You could be an awesome wrestler in the ring, which there's a lot of guys who are, but there's people who can't really do shit on the mic, or they're very average. So it hurts them from getting from here to the mid card up to the upper echelon and being more of a primetime person, and being in that main card more consistently than what they are. Example, Shinsuke. I understand. He's from Japan.
Exactly what I was going to say.
So the Japanese wrestlers already have a disadvantage, but we've seen Japanese wrestlers hold the world titles before and stuff, and it all depends on how they take that disadvantage and work it to their advantage and how they go about doing that. So it's one of those things. But yes, that's part of my criteria as well.
Nakamura has more charisma than most of the Japanese wrestlers I think I've ever seen. That's the thing that separates him. He has a boatloads of charisma. So
yeah, he's a different, unique type of Japanese guy.
Yeah. So, and all those points that you guys have made, as far as being able to talk on a mic, being able to perform in the ring, your gimmick, those I agree with all those points, and I don't think there's anything you really need to add to that. I think those are the three best criterias to have for a GOAT in wrestling, because those are the three things that are gonna make you a top-notch wrestler in any, doesn't matter where you go, TNA, Ring of Honor, AEW, WWE. If you can have all three of those things, which not a lot of guys do have, at least not right now in wrestling. I mean, we've seen it over the past years, past decades, but right now it doesn't seem like a lot of guys have those three elements to be able to pull from and say, okay, this guy is an upper echelon type guy in wrestling. There's a couple here and there, and I'm sure we'll talk about those guys in a little bit, but I can't think anything else to add to that. Darth, Pat, you got anything you would add to those three things that you think is important when we're talking about the GOAT?
No, not really. I mean, I know Bret Hart's given a shoot interview where he said that in his view, it's based on three things. It's like your promo, your work, and your look.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, just so for anybody out there who hasn't seen it, he basically, he was giving the examples. He was contrasting himself with Hulk Hogan. He rated Hogan like a 10 out of a 10 for his look, a 10 out of a 10 for his promo, and I think a 1 out of a 10 for his work.
I'd agree with. I would go with the 1. I would go with the 1 on that also.
I disagree with it. So it was a 2.
I disagree with that just because it's more than just the actual in-ring work. No, it's the psychology aspect too. It's the ability to play to the crowd and hold the crowd in your palm of your hand, and Hogan was one of the best at doing that.
Storytelling too.
Yeah, Bret then rated himself as I think he said either was a 9 or a 10 out of a 10 for his work, but he only rated himself only a 6 on his look, and only a 3 or a 4 for his promo. Which I think if you added those numbers up, Hogan actually came out slightly on top, which is kind of funny.
By 1 point.
Yeah, but even so, I mean, I think look is important. I mean, obviously, I think it just this is not a fair comparison in so many ways, but I think generally speaking, you'd rather be looking at a guy like Hulk Hogan than at a guy like Marco Stunt. I mean,
I don't even know who that guy is. That tells you how good he was.
One looks like a wrestler. One looks like he's a 12-year-old kid who shouldn't be allowed past the barricade. So, that's all I'm saying. So, I think those are really like the only factors, because those are what you basically have to build on. And if you don't have those things, you're just not getting anywhere.
All right. So, and just kind of take your point just a little bit, because I've seen some wrestlers from way back, like in the late 70s, early 80s. Like I think it was Playboy Bobby, what the heck?
Playboy Buddy Rose.
Yeah, Playboy Buddy Rose. Thank you, Darth Pat. Like that dude, I'm sorry, he might have been able to sell like all hell in the ring. He might have had a good gimmick, but he did not look the part of a wrestler. And I know his whole thing was kind of a play on actually his body type. At least I hope it was, because if he really thought he was sexy, that's kind of freaking gross, because he was not. I don't know what. I'm sure there were some ladies that thought he was sexy, but if you go back and if anybody wants to Google this, he was definitely not in shape by any means. But that's just right there. That's your look doesn't lead to a top tier guy, because he didn't have the look of a really good wrestler, of somebody that could perform in the ring. So even if he could and he had really good mic skills, that third part kind of makes it maybe hard to watch or hard to believe in the character that he's actually portraying, in the ring. So.
Well, what I know of Playboy Buddy Rose is that he was kind of like a mainstay up in the Portland territory, in Pacific Northwest Wrestling, which is where Roddy Piper came out of. And he was like a lot thinner at the time, and he just kind of ballooned as the years went on.
Mm-hmm.
And when he, like, if you see footage of him from, WWF from like the late 80s, they were doing that whole like blow away diet thing where it's like he's like sitting in front of like this huge fan and pouring this like what looks like freaking baby powder on him, and like it was supposed to blow away the fat or something. So obviously by then they were using it in a parodic manner. But to what you say is also, of course, very true. But it's also, I think, it just also shows how times change. Like if you go back to like in late 80s, early 90s WWF, you see so many kind of like big burly guys who were either like fat or had, I guess we could almost call like maybe like beer belly kind of guys. And there's so many guys you can throw into that category, whether it's like Greg Valentine or Ron Bass or, the Honky Tonk Man to an extent. And then you got guys like Kamala and One Man Gang and King Kong Bundy and the Big Boss Man and Earthquake and Typhoon. And generally speaking, those guys probably wouldn't be able to cut it in today's WWE. I mean, there are some guys who are similar to them now, like the Heavy Machinery guys, and I guess Keith Lee could fit into that description as well. But they're much more the exception than the rule anymore. So it just goes to show how times have changed, and how people's what people think of as being a pro wrestler when they look at them has just evolved over time.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So we got our criteria. We got to be able to talk to the mic. You definitely got to be able to work in the ring, and you got to have the look and gimmick that goes along with those two other things. All right, so let's talk about some of the greats of wrestling. So, greats of wrestling. I mean, there's so many guys that we could throw out that were just great overall. I mean, go back to, maybe you guys won't agree with me, but I think Warrior is one of, though his career was relatively short as far as the Warrior portion goes, he was great to watch in the ring. Like, his promos were crazy, but he was fun to watch in the ring. I thought his character was believable as far as the crazy, like, super strong guy. I don't know. I throw him in as one of the greats in the ring. I know you guys may not agree with that, but
yeah, I don't.
I have to. He was just one of my favorite people to watch as a kid, growing up watching it. I loved watching the Warrior.
That part of it I'll agree with. I liked watching him, but I don't even know if he'd be sniffing my top 20.
I mean, he was a guy who absolutely had the look and the gimmick in regards to that. His in-ring ability was very, even for
suspect.
all the years, his his best matches were against Macho Man and like Rick Rude. You know, he was still very green for even being in the league in WWF for multiple years. You can still tell that he wasn't. He just wanted to do a certain thing and be done.
Mm-hmm.
And if he liked you, he would start doing other stuff to like make the match better. His promos, I don't even know where to rank his promos. It was just fucking like outer space type of shit. So yeah, I mean, he's
three
one of those,
or four maybe. His promo.
He's one of those guys who had the look and had the really cool gimmick that everyone can buy into. But all the other stuff is kind of very.
He was lacking
a lot.
And I value
he was my favorite wrestler as a kid though. So like I liked him. I couldn't wait to root for somebody other than Hogan. So I was ecstatic when Ultimate Warrior came along. So sweet, I don't have to root for Hogan anymore. Yes.
And the music too was cool.
Yeah.
One of my other childhood with this one, I think you guys would more agree on with as one of the greats of wrestling is definitely the Macho Man Randy Savage.
Ooh, that's definitely more
your like.
He's more in that. He's definitely in that discussion for sure. Like he's definitely one of those guys that's borderline, like arguably top 10 type guy.
Now I know I'm kind of kind of dating. Where I'm going with this, but Macho Man was, he could talk. I mean, he didn't have like tons of great promos, but he had some pretty good promos, and all his promos, you can at least listen to him and not be like bored or be like, oh my God, shut up, dude. Like, good to talk, because he kept you interested, even if it wasn't like a crazy crazy great promo.
And he had a good look and he had a good entrance for sure.
Hell yeah. And his look, I think his look got better the longer he was in WWE. Like, I feel like his look went from just wearing the bandana and coming down the ring with Miss Elizabeth to now he has the bandana, and now he's got the crazy cape that he's got that's all bedazzled and stuff like that. Sequins, I guess it would be because it was sequins, not bedazzled.
Coming out with Sensational Sherry, when he was a heel, that was. He was able to evolve his gimmick,
and then
his character.
He was a really good wrestler too.
He had really cool cowboy hats eventually, and towards the end of his career, with the big old like sunglasses and stuff like that. Like his character just was really, really cool. And you're right, AJ. He was a hell of a work in the freaking ring. Like that guy. He's still to this day. And if anybody ever wants to argue with me on this, you guys or anybody that's watching this wants to argue with me, he has the best freaking elbow drop from the top rope that I've ever seen. Like, correct. The dude laid out like flat. Like, he didn't come down like on his side and then like, he landed completely flat on his side. Like
everybody tries to mimic him. So yeah. I mean,
yeah. And so to say that since the 80s. Nobody's done it better is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Velveteen's the closest I've seen. I would say Velveteen's the closest I've seen to being similar to Savage, but he's not there. But he's probably the closest I've seen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd agree with that, Velveteen. And then I'm gonna jump into I'm gonna give you guys one more, and then I think I'll let Darth Pat go. And that would be from more of the modern age. I would have to go really with Triple H is probably one of those guys that's greats of the ring, just because he's been able to take. I mean, you think about where he started when he came into WWE, and the first gimmick I remember, and this might be his very first gimmick in WWE, was Hunter Hearst Helmsley, the aristocrat, aristocrat, with the hand behind his back, and
he curtsied.
I'm so much better than you, and and then evolved his character after he got in trouble to Triple H, being part of DX, to the Game, King of Kings. He just kept on kind of just little here, little there. That he got better and better. His mic skills, I would definitely say, got better over time.
Yeah.
Longevity wise for him too, he's like been able to wrestle still from time to time. Like he can still I mean, we saw him when we went to WrestleMania. He can still wrestle. Like, I don't want to see him every week, but he can still go if he has to, and he's still willing to do it. So
it's not like Undertaker where we're like, okay, Undertaker, we think it's time for you to hang it up. Like, you don't have to even come back once a year. Like, we appreciate what you've done. You've had a great career. Triple H, it's like, for me with Triple H now, it's more like, okay, we know who you are. We know that you can still wrestle, but you're the back, you're one of the, the suits now. It's all right to be a suit. Like, you don't have to come back and impress us. Like, we know what you can do. Like, we know you still got it there, Big Gan. But just as far as watching him over the years and what he's been able to do and continue to evolve, granted, we got a little sick of him when he was coming out every Monday night and giving us a 20-minute promo to start off every freaking Monday Night Raw. It was like, oh my God, dude, like, shut up. We don't need to see you every week, the beginning of every show. Like, shut up already and let somebody else have the mic.
But then everybody hated him, and that's what they wanted.
Very true.
So
that would definitely be one other of my greats. I just wanted to throw a couple out there.
You never saw pictures of him when he was terrorizing, Jeremy?
No, I never saw terrorizing, but I'm pretty sure that was WCW.
It was.
So I was going on his WWE career.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking around because that was his first gimmick.
Yeah. No, I heard about the terrorizing, and I heard it was pretty terrible.
It was horrible.
It was as good as G.I. Bro.
It was horrible.
So
they basically were trying to make him look like the second coming of Lex Luger, really.
Yeah, because Lex Luger was
were.
So one that would not be on my grades would be Lex Luger.
Also.
Because I don't think he could wrestle very well. I don't think he was a great wrestler. I don't think he was a great mic skills guy. He had a great look.
Overrated for sure, that guy.
The gimmick that went along with his look was pretty shitty. So,
we may all agree on that we think Lex Luger's a tad bit overrated. We may all four agree on that.
The biggest problem with Lex Luger is that he was just a natural heel, and they tried to make him into a babyface so many times. And I want to say that outside of, I think, like the time where he was on his first babyface run after he got kicked out of the Horsemen, and then in like the first year of opposing the NWO, I don't think that the audience ever fully got behind Luger as a face. I mean, we know they didn't get fully behind Luger as a face when, Vince tried to turn him into Hulk Hogan 2.0 back in
slam Yokozuna.
Yeah, like the fans never really just never got fully behind him then. So.
Very bad.
He got chance after chance after chance after chance, and he could never like crack that like top 10 or top 20, whatever. He got so many opportunities, he could never just get over that hump.
I think he got the chances because of his look, but I also think that maybe one of the reasons why he never really got over that hump is because there was always somebody else. Like when he was a face in WCW, there was Dusty, or there was Sting, or there was, somebody else. And when he was there in WWF, of course, I think, there ended up being that resentment about that they were pushing him instead of Bret. So I think the audience had gotten behind Bret at that point. So,
yeah.
Okay. All right. So Darth Pat, give us 1, 2, maybe 3 of your what you would consider greats of the wrestling world.
Okay. Well, one guy I kind of mentioned him already, Ricky Steamboat.
Yeah,
I want to mention him because you go back and watch a Ricky Steamboat match really from any point in his career. There's really nothing you can really find to fault. I mean, he was fundamentally sound. He could move. He could fly. He could hit you with power moves. So he was pretty versatile. And one of the things too is that he's not big. I don't think Steamboat is 6 feet tall, but they did a smart thing with him too, in that whenever they were matching him up with somebody, they never really ever had him in there with somebody who made him look small, no matter like who he was really wrestling. So that helped. And of course he had great feuds with, whether it was Jake Roberts or Rick Rude or Randy Savage or obviously Ric Flair. He had really good feuds with all of those guys. Like I said, he wasn't the greatest promo, but like I said, he was great work rate, great look. I also kind of mentioned before, he never really worked heel that I know of, so it's a little bit of a detriment against him. But at the same time, can you ever try imagining booing Ricky Steamboat? I can't.
His biggest drawback ultimately was just that he never wanted to completely commit. His family came first, and he didn't wrestle for long enough. That's my only, and it's not his fault. It's just it's life. Like he wanted to, his family was more important to him. So his biggest drawback is that his career was shorter and he wasn't always around. He would come, beat Ric Flair and then lose the belt and disappear. Like he had stints,
random stints, coming back for like a year, going away, coming back for a year.
He was really, really good though.
It's interesting because he works the first Starrcade and then he also worked the first WrestleMania. So like he goes from Crockett to WWF in that time span. He has a fairly decent long run with WWF, but after he wins the Intercontinental belt and they supposedly had ideas of making him like a long-term Intercontinental champion.
He has a kid.
Like, hey, I just had a kid. Can I have a month or two off? What? That's it. I'm going to make you lose to the honky tonk, man.
Right, after one of the best matches of all time.
Yeah.
With Savage.
And so he comes back, he loses the belt, he comes back for a few months, then he leaves. He goes back to Crockett. He has those great matches with Flair in '89. Then he moves into a feud with Luger, and after like one or two matches with Luger, he disappears again. He shows back up in WWF with the Dragon gimmick in '91.
I remember that.
He's only there for a few months because he supposedly again didn't like the direction. And I guess supposedly he wanted to turn heel, and they were like no, and so he leaves again. He shows back up in WCW like in '92, and then by like '94 is like I think when he suffered the back injury that pretty much ended his career. So like he had like some tag title runs in there that were good.
He had a really good Iron Man match with Rick Rude, too, I think.
Yeah, he had good matches with Rick Rude. He had good matches with Steve Austin. He had a couple more good matches with Flair, and then it was like, boom, he was done.
So that's his biggest drawback is the longevity.
Yeah, and, well, the interesting thing, too, is I think both he and Flair have said some of their best stuff was back in the 70s that there's no videotape of. So it's like, damn, I wonder what it was like then when you think, especially if you think about their '89 matches. It's like if they're saying that their matches in the '70s were better than those matches, my God, what did we miss?
I mean, when Ric Flair did his Hall of Fame speech, he said Steamboat was the best guy he wrestled against. I mean, when Ric Flair is up on his Hall of Fame speech saying this guy is the best guy I was ever in the ring with, that's like one of the all-time greats saying this is the best guy I've ever been in the ring with. So that probably said a lot for Steamboat. And then Steamboat came back in his 50s and wrestled at WrestleMania and put on a show. And he's one of the few guys when the fans were chanting, "You still got it," he deserved it. Like, he legitimately deserved that chant. They say that for everybody. Steamboat put on a show for a guy in his 50s.
Yeah, I mean, so it was... That was cool to see that, and it was also obviously cool for Chris Jericho to really kind of help out with that, really to make it look like it meant something and everything. So so that's what was cool about that. So always had a lot of love for Steamboat. Again, just kind of wish he had been there more often, wherever there was.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see what his career turned into had he maybe been around longer. They did turn him heel. Okay, let's see how this goes. It would have been interesting to see those things. But like AJ said, he was very big on family, which I can't fault him for. I mean, shit, my family has always come first in my world, no matter what's going on. So, I'm right there with him.
The slightly ironic thing about family coming first for him, of course, is that his wife divorced him. Pretty high profile, and then also like won the rights to his name.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I did hear about that. Yeah,
that's just insane.
It's ironic, I guess. And that he always had the whole thing about his family came first. And then his wife
she screwed him, really.
His wife literally took his name. So,
Crazy.
But again, you talk about, like, what would he have turned heel? Well, what would have happened if he had just stayed and he had a long run with the Intercontinental title? Whenever Vince decided to take it off of him, might Vince have thought, well, I can put the belt on him? Who knows? Maybe he would have been world champion in WWF, and that would have been a whole different thing. So,
yeah.
Again, it's a great what if. But
what's another one, Darth Pat?
Another one, I just kind of mentioned him from the same era. I don't think a lot of people ever really think of him as being like one of the all-time greats, but to me, in a lot of ways, he is, and that's Jake the Snake Roberts. Now, Jake, it's much more about the promo, the psychology, than necessarily the work. Like, I don't think you'd ever really say that Jake Roberts was necessarily the greatest technician or anything like that. But he was the master. He was the master of psychology, both on the mic and in the ring, because the way he moved, the way he worked guys, it was, very much of a particular way, and that it was all about setup. And of course, he had the finisher that literally everybody wanted to see all the time. And it was, it's ironic because he said that the move was more or less created by pure accident, the DDT, and that, he was putting a guy in a front face lock and they tripped over each other's feet. And so, like, they landed with him falling backwards and the other guy falling with his head hitting the mat. And he said the guy he was in the ring with was smart enough to just sell it. And because everybody went like, oh,
and now that's just a normal move in a match now.
Right. Yeah, which always kind of bothers me. I'll be perfectly honest. But he moved in a very particular way, and again, he was somebody who was great both as a face and a heel. There's great promos you can see him cut as both a face and a heel. Like the promo he cut before his WrestleMania 6 match with Ted DiBiase is outstanding because he's the face, but he's cutting it in such a cold, calculating manner where he's talking about how after the match DiBiase will be the one like wallowing in his own failure and being the one that's destroyed because he hasn't been able to live up to his wealth and all this. So it's a great promo. And then obviously when he turned heel in 1991, the whole stuff with the Ultimate Warrior, those promos were fantastic. Like that whole set of like vignettes and everything that led to it. And then, of course, it leads to the whole thing where after Warrior gets bitten by the snake, he's like, yeah, reach for me. I'm a snake. Never trust a snake. So it's just the way he did it to me. Jake Roberts always held me in the palm of his hand. So.
I mean, thank gosh he was a Bible thumper. We would have never got Austin 316 too. So
yeah, see, that's an ironic part. Is like I wasn't watching WWF in 1996 when he came back and he did that. It seems like it was a bit forced. I totally understood why they were doing it, but it really does feel like it's a reinvention of the character and not necessarily a way that the character needed to be reinvented. I don't know.
No, I'm just thankful that was the gimmick he did and he cut the promo. I mean, I don't know if it was his decision to use the Bible quote, but I mean, it worked out clearly.
Yeah, it's just, I still want to know, I can't remember if we've discussed this before, whether or not that line was scripted or not, but I kind of always hope that it wasn't because it just shows that Austin was great.
Supposedly, everything I've read said that was on the fly. He cut that promo on the fly. He didn't even know what he was going to say until he was out there. Everything I've read makes it sound like Austin kind of came up with that.
Austin with the 316?
Yes.
Well, yeah, because he
very much felt like he spur of the moment,
Yeah, everything I've read makes it sound like it was spur of the moment. I've not read anything otherwise. So.
Well, yeah, and he said in his podcast multiple times that when he was told the promo that Jake the Snake cut that day on him, like right before he was supposed to do his, and that's when he came up with the Austin 316 part. So he didn't even know until somebody told him what Jake the Snake said, and then he came up with that on the fly about the Austin 316, just says I whooped your ass. So.
And hey, if we had not gotten Austin 316, we never would have gotten McMahon 632.
Jesus. So no, I agree with you, Pat. Like my only thing about Jake is, and not that I don't think he was a good promo, not that I didn't think he was a good hand, is I thought he had a good look. I couldn't always follow his character very well. Like there was times where I would get disinterested with his character because it was very deep stuff that he would do sometimes that was like hard for me to follow. So it was like, okay, I don't know what this guy's talking about or what he's trying to say. You know, if I went back and watched it now, it'd be a whole different story. But when I was watching as a kid, you know, maybe 15, 16 years old, maybe somewhere in there, it didn't always make sense to me what he was trying to tell, what he was trying to convey over the mic. So
yeah, cutting a deep intellectual promo to a bunch of kids, it's hard to follow. But at that time, it was kids, but a lot of the young males and up to 35 and even the older ones who are still hanging on to their old 70s wrestling and whatnot. So they probably got it, but
yeah,
the kids and the females were like, what the fuck y'all talking about over there?
I think for him and at the time, like, kids weren't maybe necessarily getting the promo, but they were getting the move and the snake. So
yes.
that's what kept him popular with the kids, I would say, probably.
Yeah. All right.
Just real quick, one more modern guy.
Sure.
We've talked about him numerous times, so I'm not going to go list through all his accolades again. Jericho. I mean, again, just the constant reinvention. Always going back to the drawing board, always coming up with something a little new, changing his look a little bit, cutting his hair this time, cutting his hair even shorter when he comes back, switching from pants to tights, or just whatever. I mean, it's just like he was always tweaking and always finding new ways to reposition himself and reinvent himself. And again, great heel, but great face too, really, when you come right down to it. When he wanted to get the fans behind him, he had ways of getting the fans behind him. And I also just want to say, I really feel like the best version of Chris Jericho, you guys can disagree, but I always really felt the best version of Chris Jericho was like initial heel turn WCW Chris Jericho, 1998, when he was trying to dominate the cruiserweight division and everything, and he had the big feud with Dean Malenko. I still always kind of feel like that was like the best Chris Jericho.
That was the whining Jericho, which just like complained about everything, but it worked for him because he did it in a good way.
I also had the great rip-off theme music, that sounded like Pearl Jam's Even Flow.
And he had Ralphus. That was my favorite version of Chris Jericho until the Kevin Owens you made the list thing. So like that was my favorite Chris Jericho until they put him with Owens, and then I don't think I'm never gonna like anything better than him and Owens, because as I've said, Owens and him together was the best thing that's happened in the last 5 years of wrestling. So
yeah, I would definitely say the other two great versions of Jericho were the Kevin Owens era. You just made the list, Jericho, but then also the 2008 heel turn on Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho, where he started like wearing the suits and he kind of changed his promo style around completely. That was, to me, was great too. You just summed everything up with Jericho right there. How many other guys can we talk about? Well, this version of him was the best, because most guys there's like 2 or 3. Jericho there's like 6. Yeah.
So there's 6 or 7 different versions of Chris Jericho you can pick. So that speaks volumes for what that guy's done to recreate himself, and I don't think we've ever seen anybody better at that than him.
It speaks to his longevity, and it speaks to his creativity, because I think it's pretty obvious when you can tell like where a talent has a lot of input on what he's doing and what he's saying versus when like the creative team is controlling it. And I think Jericho is the kind of guy that, there's no way that anybody on the creative team in WWE ever came up with the list. Okay, there's just no way. So.
Speaking of Jericho, I saw he just got rights to some of his stuff, like the Lionheart and stuff. Like WWE actually got rights to some of his own stuff from WWE, not like Y2J, but they said some of his other stuff he actually got rights to.
Y2J they'll never give up. That's definitely a WWE.
But still, good for him. Good for WWE and him, and I feel like I just told Nicole or Zach today. I hope that when he's done in AEW, he needs to go back and get put in the Hall of Fame, because that guy deserves to be in WWE's Hall of Fame. So I hope somewhere down the road there's not like bad blood and they don't put him in just because of AEW. Like hopefully when he's done there, they'll still put him in, because
I would certainly hope so too, because when you really come right down to it, can you really even still call AEW competition for WWE yet? And I don't really think that the answer is yes. So,
yeah. I mean, he changed his look in New Japan too.
So those are 3 for me.
Okay. Awesome. All right. AJ, I'm going to have you go last on this one, so I'm going to kick it over to Theo for a quick 2 or 3.
Okay.
So, you got, man, which one do I want to go with here? I'm going to go with Stone Cold first.
Nice.
The whole 316, playing off Jake Roberts over here, a 316 thing. But, you look what he did for them in that time. He was the top guy, really, for the Attitude Era, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
His feuds with McMahon and all that stuff, and his feuds with other people pretty much helped launch the Attitude Era, which led into other things. Because if you kind of think about it, who else was McMahon going to put in that top spot that would have been just as successful as what Stone Cold did for them at that time? And you kind of look at the list of guys, and maybe it could have worked, but not as long. It had him and would have had a more impactful, more of an impact on the industry than what Stone Cold did at that time frame. In regards to that, I was indifferent with him. There's times I liked him, there's times I didn't like him, but I always liked his badass attitude. Flipping off the crowd, flipping off people. I always liked that when he won the title and made his own goddamn belt with the Smoking Skull belt. That shit was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And there was times where I kind of like, all right, you need to change it up a little bit. But he was kind of one of those guys where he really didn't tweak too much of his gimmick. It was pretty much the same throughout his whole career. He's one of the only few guys who can kind of keep his gimmick pretty much the same and still kind of get away with it, and have it work over and over and over again. He may have tweaked a couple things here and there, but it's pretty much for the most part that was always his gimmick. The vest, the beer chugging. Well, you bring alcohol on a TV show with a TV show like that. I know somebody doesn't like beer drinking people, but it's okay. I liked his gimmick. He had pretty much, he could cut a promo, he could work in the ring, he could tell a story. He had great matches with a lot of different guys. So he's definitely one of the guys who has to be in everybody's top 10 list, I believe. And if not, whatever, because he's in my top 10 list. He is.
And it's funny because he had probably the plainest look of any modern era wrestler. Like black boots, black trunks.
Goldberg's was plainer than Stone Cold's.
But not as popular.
But he still was relevant. I'm just saying he was relevant. Yeah, I wish he was irrelevant, but he was relevant. So his was the plainest look, I think, of anybody.
Yeah. So Stone Cold. I 100% agree with that one. I love Stone Cold.
I liked him better when he was in WCW, actually. So I preferred him as Stunning Steve Austin. So
I kind of
never saw that gimmick.
What?
Well, I did, and I saw it like when he was in USWA, even before WCW.
Even when he was in ECW, he was entertaining.
Yeah, like when that used to air, USWA aired on the afternoons on ESPN back in the early '90s. So you'd see all these matches where it was like, Steve Austin and Tom Pritchard, or Steve Austin and Eric Embry against Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett, and it was like that was kind of cool because it was like completely new guys for me at the time, but. It was a completely different gimmick, and obviously the Ringmaster didn't work. But the funny thing is, there's this one channel on YouTube that has been doing like week by week a comparison of like Raw versus Nitro, and they just got to the beginning of 1996. So they just got to the first, like the presentation of the Ringmaster and everything, and they made him the $1 million champion. They made him the $1 million champion and paired him with DiBiase, and he's got the first interview in the ring with Brother Love, which is kind of funny. But the interesting thing to me about that was, like, I watched the promo then, and it's like he proved right from the start he didn't need a damn manager. No disrespect to DiBiase, who was one of the greats, but his promo style was a little interesting. But like he does this first thing in that first promo where he was like, I want everybody watching at home to put your hand up to the screen so you can touch greatness and all this. And I'm like, it was a great promo. So it's like, why are they ever pairing with DiBiase? it really made no sense. And I can't really say it hurt him, but because 6 months later he's cutting the 316 promo, but it was just weird that they didn't really know quite how to use him at first. And another thing about Austin I always find ironic is he's arguably the biggest superstar of all time in terms of money made or whatever. But think about how much longer his career could have been if Owen hadn't botched the damn pile driver at SummerSlam, because that took him out of action for a year there from late 99 to late 2000. But it also obviously brought a very early end to his career too. So he could have, and I think one of AJ's complaints about Austin in the past has been that he just kind of was doing the same stuff over and over again. Haven't you said that before?
Yeah.
Like his work. I feel like he was probably a lot more limited in the ring after the pile driver botch and everything. So I think it's a shame because, as great as he was, there's always a possibility he could have been better, or if maybe not better, just hung around a little longer to have worked more thoroughly with some different guys.
My favorite version of Austin was the Hollywood Blondes with Flying Brian Pillman.
Yeah,
that's my favorite. That's my favorite version of Austin. They were fabulous. That's actually where you really see that. That's the first time you really see that there's something there with Austin. And Pillman was carrying that team, but you got to see them with the stupid movie thing. That was innovative stuff. That was stuff that WCW didn't usually come up with, stuff like that, because that was very innovative at the time.
They put the lights in the boots and everything, because I remember those were popular in the sneakers around that time, but they put them in their damn wrestling boots.
So
that was a good gimmick. I agree.
And they didn't get a long enough run either for whatever
they
reason.
did not. And because I'm reading Pillman's book, I'm reading all about that now and all the crap backstage and all the shit they were going through. So
there's a lot of rumors as to who might have said, "Oh, we need to split these guys up now. They've gotten too over."
Hogan.
Well, no, because they were split up before Hogan got there. I've always thought that they were kind of always pointing the finger at Flair for that one.
I mean, there's a lot of anti-Hogan stuff in this book too already. So,
all right, Theo. So we got Stone Cold.
So my second person on here is part of Vince McMahon's, well, you're my top guy, so I'm going to limit you to the 5 moves of doom.
Sweet.
Yes.
Joe just took one of my guys.
Mr. You can't see me, John Cena. Listen, he never turned heel. I mean, he was kind of a heel-ish thugonomics, but
he was a heel at first, but he never turned heel once he turned face.
So, Vince, of course, found his golden gem and limited him to how many moves he can do per match and all that fun stuff.
Until recently, he kind of let Cena open it up finally, about 2014, 2015. So,
well, yeah, true, because he trusted him at some point, I guess. But no, I mean, Cena had a great run, 10 years in regards to it, 16-time champion. Listen, he's a company guy, you know what I mean? So when other guys were dropping the ball or other guys weren't performing, of course, Vince is always going to go back to his guy he can trust. And John Cena was his guy he can trust. He was good on the mic. He could definitely do more moves than 5, so he could definitely work in the ring for the most part. And he knew how to tell a story in the ring too. He sold moves. He sold oversells sometimes, but he was very good at a lot of the aspects of what you consider your GOAT to be. But I think one of the things that kind of hurt him was, I guess, it's kind of more because of Vince not trusting other people. It was because there was a time where there was other guys who really weren't able to go to that level. So you kept seeing Cena. And it's like you're seeing all these. I remember a 2-year time frame. I don't remember what time frame it is. You guys can tell me. 2-year time frame was fucking Super Cena time. Where every single match, oh my God, he's gonna finally lose. Nope, he fucking pulls some shit out of his ass and he fucking wins. It just felt like he at times felt like it was a 80s version of a Hogan 2.0 sometimes, which made me kind of like him, dislike him, like him, I don't know what I think about him anymore. I kind of think, which is the other person I'm going to segue into, I kind of think when CM Punk came on the scene, and some other wrestlers in that time frame, and Cena started having feuds with them, I think is when Vince kind of let up on the reins to let Cena do more in the ring, because there was more guys that were more athletic and you didn't have too many of the big guys around. So he had to do some of the shit that he did back in OVW back in the day with the rest of the guys. So you got to see more of a wrestler.
Right. He had really
John Cena.
Really good matches with Punk. He had good matches with Kevin Owens. He had good match with Sami Zayn. Like, all of a sudden, Cena, like, opened it up. Like, if you go back between 2010 and 2020, half of the good matches in WWE that weren't NXT, Cena was in a good chunk of them, actually. So, and then all these people are still chanting Cena sucks. And it's like, that cheer is dumb to me. So, or when they chant "You can't wrestle" to John Cena, like that's why I think wrestling fans are idiots. When you're chanting "You can't wrestle" to John Cena, then you make yourself look like an ignorant person at that point. If you want to chant "You can't wrestle" to the great Khali, that's fine. Or if you want to, there are some people that we can go down the list, I'm sure, and find people that you can chant that to, and it's fine. Chanting that to John Cena and chanting that to Roman Reigns, I don't think are really something that should be happening. So just because you don't like a guy, it's not just because you don't like a guy. I don't like Keith Lee. I'm not going to chant "You can't wrestle" to him because he can wrestle. It's just the rest of him I don't like. I'm not going to chant "You can't wrestle" to somebody who can wrestle. You sound ignorant when you do stuff like that. And the Cena sucks chant, that got stupid to where people are just like, oh, this is the cool thing to do, so now I'm going to do it. I'm going to be cool like everybody else. Like,
yeah.
Well, and if you look at some of the matches that he had to have over time, I mean, he had to fight the Great Khali how many times? And no offense to the Big Show, but Big Show, yeah, he's limited in what he can do in the ring. He had to fight the Big Show how many times?
Yeah.
He was fighting Ryback, who was terrible in the ring. Edge was, I think, at the very end of his career before he left for his neck problem. You still had the two brands, so it wasn't like everybody was on the Raw roster. They needed to have guys over on the SmackDown roster. He did have matches with Randy Orton, but you saw a ton of those matches. Like, everybody got sick of seeing those matches.
Yes.
Like, oh, we got to see Randy Orton and John Cena again.
Oh my
God.
I'm sick of seeing Randy Orton at this point, period.
So, if he wasn't fighting Randy Orton, if he didn't have Edge while Edge was still there, he was fighting these big guys that they couldn't do much in the ring, or if they could, they were really bad, and you were like, oh my God, I hope he doesn't get killed.
That's a credit to Cena too for carrying feuds with some pretty terrible guys. Like, sometimes he definitely was forced in. It happens to everybody. I think it happened to Cena more than other people, and he was able to. Unfortunately, the one thing for Cena that worked against him is he is the person responsible for them going back to TV PG and stuff like Cena. Yes. That's Cena's doing. It's 100% his doing. And anybody that knows that it is doing, even as much as I like Cena, I'm not thrilled that he was responsible for that.
Yeah. I mean, he had a good feud with Rusev too. I mean, I was really didn't really know how I thought about Rusev, but Rusev's an athletic dude. He could wrestle, and he had a good feud with him. That was I liked that feud with those two as well.
Absolutely.
My favorite version of Cena is definitely Rapper Cena, though. I definitely liked Rapper Cena. That was
coming from the rap guy. Yes.
No, his best promos were pretty much then. Like he was doing stuff that was very cutting edge then that we had never seen before, and he made it work, and he got lucky. Like, if he hadn't dressed up as Vanilla Ice on that Halloween episode of SmackDown, we may never have gotten anything out of John Cena, because he was almost on his way out at that point.
Yeah, you never know. So that segues into my third guy. Okay,
well,
go ahead.
I just want to say, you're talking about like when Cena was wrestling guys who weren't that great. They were basically they went back to the Hogan booking basically with Cena. It's like,
correct.
Well, Hogan was obviously, a huge guy with huge muscles. Cena was a guy with huge muscles. So you got to put him in there against a guy who's going to make him look small so that you make him think that he's the underdog. So that's why you get feuds with the Big Show, with the Great Khali, with Umaga. Even JBL, to an extent, you could say, is a guy that makes Cena look smaller. The couple times he wrestled Kane, things of that sort. So but it's obvious, while he had some good matches in there with some of those guys, he had a couple good matches with Umaga and JBL. Obviously, he was always better if he was worked up with somebody who could actually do stuff in the ring, like Punk or Edge or Orton or Styles or, those types of guys. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Theo,
So,
I know who you're going with next, but I'm going to let you say it.
He's on my shirt. My CM Punk shirt right there.
What, the Cobra Commander's on your shirt?
It's the Cobra server has Punk underneath there. You got guys.
I know. I love that shirt. That shirt's cool.
CM Punk. I've always liked him. I watched him in the Indies, and I watched him on all the other places, ROH and the old TNA, in regards to him. He was just different, I guess, in the Indies, so I always followed him in that manner. But him and Cena had a great match, Money in the Bank, 2011, that got nominated as the Match of the Year and Feud of the Year, I believe, as well, in 2011. Punk, he didn't need Paul Heyman, but they still stuck Paul Heyman with him. He was great on the mic. We all know the pipe bomb. But besides that, he was overall good. He can lead a little faction with the Straight Edge Society. He was able to do multiple things. He can be a technical wrestler. He could do some high-flying stuff when need be. He did more of that early in his career than later in his career for obvious reasons. He was one of those smaller guys like Daniel Bryan, who a lot of people didn't give a chance, and he had people who believe in him and his skills, and he finally got the opportunity, and he did what he did with the opportunity. He had good feuds with multiple people, and he was one of those guys who can, do almost pretty much everything. So he's my third dude.
I agree.
I have always disliked the fact that we never got to see the Pepsi plunge in a WWE ring, but obviously we weren't going to see that in a WWE ring.
No.
So I think it's funny that two of the guys Joe picked, my biggest issue with two of them is they dropped their ball and went home. And I know you guys don't see that the same way I do. That's unacceptable to me. So, and I will argue with all you guys all day about that's not something that was cool to do. So that's probably when I stopped liking Punk, was probably when he dropped his ball and went home. I started liking him less after The Rock beat him, because the internet community was so pissed off because The Rock beat him. I was starting to not like him at that point. But the dropping your ball and going home thing, when Austin did it, that's probably the moment. I already didn't like Austin, and that's probably the moment I started completely not liking him. I think Austin's scenario was worse when he did it, but even when Sasha did it after WrestleMania last year, I didn't like it. I didn't think that was cool when she did it either. So I'm not picking people that I don't like. I don't think when anybody does it, I'll stand by with anybody. I don't think it's cool. If The Rock did it, I would say stuff about him for doing it too. So I've never liked that when people do that, and I'm never going to, and I've been saying that for years about Stone Cold. I've not backed down from it. I'm never going to. So I just don't think it's cool when people do that kind of stuff. So
it's challenging because there's politics that go along with that too. So if you fall out of favor with the big shots, and you think you're deserving of more, and because you've proved it, and there's a big back and forth, and there's other stuff going on, people might not like it. That's fine. I'm not going to dislike him for doing it. Each is to their own in regards to that. That's fine. It doesn't matter to me. But Stone Cold's, and it was different. I'm sorry, but they pretty much fucked Sasha and Bayley. They backdoored them in my terms. I mean, you look what happened with that. Is like, hey, we're doing this, and all of a sudden 2 days late before WrestleMania or a day before, 48, 24 hours, we're just going to backdoor you as a note. We're changing to this. For what reason? And what they did made no fucking sense, because they knew the Bellas weren't going to be able to fucking do shit, because they were all over the place. Each scenario is a little different. So I get why they do it, because this industry is so cutthroat. It always has been. So unless you have that major pull like some wrestlers do. Some don't. Some might be in with the majority of them, but if they're not in fully with everyone, then you're going to have issues, and then shit's going to lead to one thing after another. And they decide to take their ball and fucking run, go home, and whatever, it's fine. Because to be honest with you, Punk can go wherever the fuck he wants, and he can make just as much money or even more than he did in WWE, because fans, the companies will pay for him because he's a name, and he can make that money in all over the places.
I mean, at least with him, he hasn't done anything since. Like, Austin came crawling back eventually. Like, at least Punk has, like, stuck to his guns on that one. So, like, at least he just like, I'm done. I don't really I'll do this again if I ever want to. So, other than that, though, I like Punk too. I really like Punk a lot too. That was just that problem arises with people, and it just bothers me when it happens. So,
yeah, it's unfortunate. But AJ, give us a couple. Who do you got?
Woo! So, I'm gonna say Ric Flair. So, I think Ric Flair is one of the 2 or 3, probably the top 2 all time. Everything that guy's done, and that guy still wants to wrestle now. So he's a crazy son of a bitch.
Yeah, he's at the point of his career probably almost 10 years ago that he could have just like hung up the boots and said, okay, I'll come in and do, like, I'll be the evil manager, or I'll come in and do a promo, or, something like that, just to promote something. But he didn't need to be stepping in the ring. I think Evolution was live. He needed to be in the ring.
A lot of Ric Flair's career was back when they were wrestling 40 minutes every night at house shows. Like his most of his career was when he was not wrestling 15 minutes a night.
Yes. Like
most of these matches are now. Like, he was doing a lot more than most people do. So, I mean, he was a really good in-ring general. Like, he was really good at, like, making people look like fucking gold. So, and he was, one of the best guys in the mic of all time too. So, I mean, we would have never got the woo off if it wasn't for Ric Flair.
So true.
Very true.
So, he's one of them for me. I'm going to say The Rock. So,
I can't disagree with that.
So, I wish The Rock's career would have been a little bit longer. You said Triple H, Jeremy. So, like, I kind of go back and forth with The Rock and Triple H when I'm, like, ranking top 10. I kind of go back and forth with who I'm going to rank higher, and I usually rank Triple H higher just because he had more longevity than The Rock. But The Rock used WWE to get to where he's at now. I don't know if I can really fault him for that either. So, like, he used WWE as a stepping stone to become the highest paid actor in the world. So,
yeah, pretty much
true.
And we will probably never ever see somebody with the charisma that guy has. So that guy is a walking boatload of charisma. So
yes, he is.
I don't think he was necessarily the best in-ring guy. I probably would only give him a 6, maybe a 6.5 out of 10 in ring. But all the other stuff he was really good at. So he had a tendency. He didn't do a lot of the, like, really crazy stuff. And I'm not saying that everybody's made for that, but in the era The Rock wrestled in, he kind of avoided the really crazy steel cage matches. I mean, he did a ladder match with Triple H, and he did the Armageddon match, but he kind of steered away from that stuff. Like, when he was doing those matches, sometimes they were with Foley, and he was beating the shit out of Foley. Foley wasn't really doing much to him. So that's always been the longevity with The Rock, and then he kind of wanted to stay in just the normal matches. He didn't really want to dabble too much into the crazy stuff, which during the Attitude Era, everybody kind of had to do that to some degree. But The Rock is one of the few guys, as Darth Pat alluded to earlier, that is good as a face and a heel. He falls in that really small group of people who is good on both sides.
Very true.
So
absolutely.
So he's a guy that I have to bring up too. Yeah. So, what did I say? I said Ric Flair and The Rock.
Yep.
Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah.
So, would be my other one. So
somebody mention my name.
He's another person that was wrestling back when Ric Flair was, and Flair and Dusty like to bleed every fucking night. So hence why Dusty's forehead looks the way it does.
Like Swiss cheese.
I'm afraid Dusty's kid thinks it's cool to be like that. Now, I think Cody is like, I want to be like my dad.
Well, let me tell you something. You got to have a forehead that looks like it's been had an iron going over it 17,000 times a day, my son. You got to have all these little scars, all this little growth and stuff that you could have 17,000 surgeries. And they're just never going to get rid of them. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
Dusty was my favorite wrestler when I was a kid when I was watching WCW. He was my favorite wrestler in WCW. So he was probably the first wrestler in WCW I ever really liked. So, and
Dusty and Sting were my two when I started watching that back in the day.
Surfer Sting, yes. As long as we're talking about Surfer Sting for me, for sure. I used to love Surfer Sting. So... Jeremy used Dusty's promo several weeks ago on the promo podcast. I mean, Dusty was really good on the mic. Also, he may not have quite fallen into "I have the look" category, but
hey,
it worked for him.
Polka dots, baby.
It worked for him.
See, there's the thing: gimmick and look have to go together. Dusty Rhodes was. His gimmick was the blue collar guy, the everyday man. Well, there's a lot of everyday mans that look like Dusty Rhodes. So his gimmick fit his look. It wasn't like he was trying to be the sexy guy or, the super fit guy or, super powerful guy or anything like that. He was the worker guy. So it fit him. So I think as far as like look of a bodybuilder wrestler, of course not, but he had the look of, his gimmick, which made sense, so yeah, I think that's where you can kind of put his look is it fit his gimmick for what he was trying to do, not like anybody else's gimmick. So you're right. It worked for him and what he was doing.
The other two guys real quick, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth with, but I just want to bring up Bret Hart because I do think Bret Hart was one of the best technical in-ring guys I've ever seen. So, and Edge is another guy that I think I didn't even like Edge at first, and he grew on me, and I learned to respect Edge as a really good. Like he really succeeded a lot more than I thought he was going to when I saw him in the Brood.
That's because you thought you knew him.
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring those two guys. I wanted to give Edge and Bret Hart a shout out because I didn't like Edge at first. And Edge, if you would have told me when he was in the Brood that he was going to have the career he had, I would have laughed in your face probably. So
yeah. All right. So that brings us to our next segment. But before we jump into that, I got one quick public service announcement, and that's to thank everybody that is watching and listening to us at this moment. We appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're catching us on YouTube, make sure you are giving us a big thumbs up, make sure you're subscribing, and make sure you are hitting that notification button so you never miss an excellent episode of this crazy ass show that we call, well, the Four Guys Roundtable Show. If you are catching us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify, make sure you give us a rating so you can help us jump up there. More people can catch us just like yourselves and get entertainment out of this. Catch us on Twitter at 4 Guys with a Z Roundtable. We are posting more and more on there on Twitter. And as always, stay tuned to the very end of the show where you will catch the Mount Rushmore GOAT of wrestling. And with that, let's move on. Let's see if we can agree on a top 10 of wrestling. This is going to be fun. I want to see if we can agree.
This might take 5 hours.
We're going to make this quick. We're going to go around and we're going to what? Okay. Good.
I feel like we've talked about a lot of the guys that should go on this list already.
I think we did. So I think we can might be able to knock this out pretty quick. So, Pat, Darth Pat, give us one. We're just gonna go, everybody's gonna get a chance to give one and see if we agree with one, at least one out of everybody's mouth.
Okay. I We haven't mentioned him in depth at all yet, but so I'll go with the Hulkster.
The Hulkster, top 10. Does everybody agree?
Yes.
He's number 10 on my list.
I would agree too. He's in the top 10. All right, so we get
barely for me.
So we got the Hulkster, Hulk Hogan, AJ.
Ric Flair.
I agree. Everybody else?
Let me think about that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we got two. I didn't think this was going to be too bad. All right, Theo.
Undertaker.
I agree.
Wow, I'm kind of surprised that AJ agreed, but yeah.
he's 9. He's 9 on my list, but he's in my top 10.
All right, so we got 3, man. We're moving right along. Here we go. So I'll throw in Shawn Michaels.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right, so we got 4. Going back to Darth Pat.
I'll agree with Michaels.
Okay, Darth Pat.
I'll throw Bret Hart on there.
I can agree with Bret Hart. I can agree with that.
Yes.
All right, so we're up to 5. Got 5 more. AJ.
John Cena.
That's tough, but I think I would agree with that. I'd put him in my top 10 wrestlers of all time. I'd agree with that.
He's 8 he's 8 for me.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Darth Pat.
What is the yay or nay to Cena?
Yeah.
I'll say yay for right this second.
All right, so we're up to 6. Theo. Uh-oh. This is getting tough. I'm scared to know what's going to come.
The other 4 guys left, I feel like we've talked about already.
I'm putting Stone Cold on there.
Okay.
Okay. Yep.
He's on mine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'll go Stone Cold.
All right. So I have to say in the top 10, The Rock. I'd have to put him in the top 10.
Got him.
All right. Everybody else? Agreed?
Yes.
All right. So we're up to 8. We only got 2 more to go, and we could finish our top 10 here. Darth Pat, you're up.
For largely sentimental reasons, and the fact that, I kind of shed a tear every time I think about him, mostly because for whatever reason he never went back. I gotta go with the Macho Man.
Yes.
I'd have to say, yeah, I'd have to agree with that too, just because of his body of work, his ability, his look, even though he didn't have always the greatest promos. AJ?
This is the first one we have that's not on.
Okay. So AJ is not in agreement. So who would you throw instead of the Macho Man?
Dusty Rhodes or Triple H. Those are my last 2 guys I have.
See, I would also have Dusty. I'm going Savage over Triple H.
If you have The Rock and Stone Cold on the list and not Triple H, then you're like I don't know how you can do that. Like I said, he's been wrestling for longer than either of those guys. Like his longevity.
Because he's not a great baby face, because he didn't reach the heights that those 2 guys did, and he's not as good of a promo as those 2 guys are. In terms of in-ring work, he might be the best of the 3 of them, but I don't think it's by a lot. So and again, it's hard to compare because again, one guy's peak was 1985 or so to say 1996 or 7 or so, and the other guy's peak is pretty much the end of that through whenever you want to say Triple H's peak was over. So it's a little hard to compare, but I think Savage all around was more impactful than Triple H was. And because we haven't really talked about this, but I'm just going to have to throw this out there. There's always going to be that part of me that's going to wonder how far Triple H's pushes would have gone, how sustained they would have been, how long they would have been if he hadn't started boffing Stephanie.
Nothing like putting your sausage in the company rolls.
Of course, that's also supposedly the reason why Savage never came back.
Yeah, I don't know. I have and I know I kind of been saying I agree a lot, and that's because all the wrestlers that we named I really liked, and I really think as we talk about the top 10, I agree with them, and it's hard to make like I think Savage belongs there, but I also think Triple H, and and Dusty belong there too. It's like a three-way tie.
So then
to get those last two spots.
Let's just say for shits and giggles, then we'll just say Dusty is in because we all seem to agree on that, and then we'll just say that Savage and Triple H are tied for that last spot or whatever. So
I can agree with that.
Then we're there. I mean, if they're tied for number 10 overall between us, then that's fine.
Do you agree with that, Theo?
I can tolerate that. I can go with that.
Thank you, Dusty.
That was Johnny Cochran, but that's okay.
Sorry, kind of sounded like you're Dusty.
I got to differentiate these voices better then.
Because I'm not disagreeing with what you guys said about Savage. He would have been my next person. So like Savage was that I went back and forth with the two of them, like between them. So it's not like Savage was 20th, like he was my next guy. So I went back and forth on them. And I don't always like Triple H. I haven't always liked Triple H. So the thing with Triple H is that's coming from a completely unbiased place with me because he's not always been my favorite. So I'm giving him a lot of credit, even though I didn't really always like him. And I think sometimes he did get where he got because of what Pat said, but I also can't take away from his ability and what he did with what happened. Like he was in DX. Like he won a bunch of titles. Like he probably put himself over sometimes, like Booker T and guys maybe we didn't think he should have. But he's never like, I've never been like, God, he's terrible. Like I've never looked at him and been like, God, he sucks. Like it's never ever been like that with him. And like I said, he's got a lot of longevity, and I definitely part of me, it's him in NXT that figures into this too. I like what he's done with NXT behind the scenes too. So I think part of this, he gets some of the credit for that too. Yeah. So him being me in my top 10, putting him ahead of The Rock, I didn't want to do it because I like The Rock way more. But I've just had this discussion with people, and I'm just like, they're all like, yeah, Triple H's career was way longer than The Rock's, and he did some things, and it's just hard to not acknowledge that in wrestling. So
I agree. And now, AJ, the jury will deliberate on your final statement there and come back with a verdict on that.
What?
We
got a top 10 list pretty quick, Jeremy. So
yeah, no, I think that I'm actually very surprised about that. Theo, are you good with all the picks at the very end there?
Yes.
All right, excellent. So that leads us into the final segments of our show, which is two things: the Stumper question, and followed by Mount Rushmore. And our Stumper question today is brought to you by AJ Nee. So AJ, what is our Stumper question that I probably will not be able to answer as usual?
Somebody might get this one. I don't think this one is like extremely difficult, but it's just an interesting. So we actually talked about one of the guys on here. One of the guys we talked about, Jake the Snake Roberts, is from Stone Mountain, Georgia. What current WWE wrestler also hails from Stone Mountain, Georgia? Or what they say when he comes out. Like Jake the Snake was always announced as from Stone Mountain, Georgia. So is this person.
I want to say, I actually know this. I want to say.
I have a guess, but it's not. It's also at the same time not sounding right in my head. So
I want to say that it is one of your least favorite current wrestlers, and it is. Holy crap! I can't think of his damn name. This is terrible. This is killing me. Because I know I have his freaking ugly ass face in my head, and I can't think of his stupid freaking name. Killing me. I'm killing myself.
Pat, what's your guess?
Well, I know he's from Georgia, but I didn't think he was from Stone Mountain. And it also doesn't sound right for him to be billed from Stone Mountain, and that's AJ.
Okay, Jeremy.
No, it's Why can't I think of his name?
Do you have a guess, Joe?
Still thinking.
It's right on the tip of my tongue. I hate when my memory doesn't help me. My memory. Oh, punch me in the head, somebody. No.
Thank you. Thank you for selling.
Strowman?
Strowman, yes, Braun Strowman. Then he's from Tennessee. Then they're billing him from Tennessee. That's the only, because I know they bill him from one of the southern states, and that's why I was thinking Strowman.
So Strowman got the big tattoo of North Carolina.
This says Nashville Strong.
Nashville Strong. Stupid ass. I hate Strowman. Who cares? Terrible wrestler.
T.O.?
He hates you too.
I know. It's okay.
Did he wrestle tonight?
Yes.
Now I have a second guess, but I think it's also wrong, so I'm not going to take a second guess, though.
Was it Drew?
No. Apollo Crews.
That was my goddamn second guess after he said he wrestled tonight. I'm like, wait a minute, doesn't Apollo? Yeah, AJ, isn't he from like
Gainesville? Or
Yes.
Not. Or
He's from Georgia, but he's not that part.
Right, but the reason why I didn't think it was Stone Mountain is because I'm saying in my head, wait a minute, he's from a town that also is the name of a prominent town in Florida. But I was thinking Jacksonville, but I'm like, no, that doesn't sound right either. But yeah, Gainesville,
I was watching.
University
Who won
of
that
Florida.
match anyway? Because I missed. I turned on the.
They did
pay-per-view.
it. They did it in the pre-show. Apollo Crews won. So, I was watching Raw one night, and they said, "Oh, from Stone Mountain, Georgia, Apollo Crews." I'm like, "Oh, okay, that'll be a stumper," because I'm like, everybody knows Jake the Snake was from there. So it worked. It wasn't like something I had to sit here and explain all night. It was pretty simple.
No, and that's funny that they bill him from that area.
He's from Georgia. I don't think he's from Stone Mountain. I think he's from the area, but that's where they bill him from. So
that's cool. I mean, I always kind of like, especially when we're talking about stuff, especially when it's wrestling and it's like cross era, if you will, where we're kind of connecting the old to the current in some way.
So that was a good one. I just came up with on a whim. I didn't go looking for it or anything. I just came up with that one on my own. So
that works.
That was a good one. That was a very good one. Because I actually had a guess. I was wrong, of course, but at least I had a guess with somebody who was relevant. And
I thought Jeremy was going to say Keith Lee. I was like, oh, here we go.
No, I know. But see, the thing that throws me off about Apollo Crews is he doesn't sound like he's from the South. Like he has no Southern drawl that I can think of.
Because he has the personality of a rock. That's why.
It's also because I just looked him up real quick. It says he was born in Sacramento, California. He says that he was raised in Atlanta. So okay. But you don't depending upon like when he first moved to Atlanta and everything like that, you wouldn't necessarily pick up an accent.
No, they said it. Like I said, I heard them say it, and I'm like, oh, that's the same place Jake the Snake is from, and I still remember that. So
yeah,
because I always thought that was cool that's where they said Jake the Snake was from, because it was kind of an oddball place.
Yep. I can't wait for the next time that they bill a wrestler as being from that magical place called Parts Unknown.
We'll see when that happens.
Well, yeah, and me and my other friends were like, Vacant is the best champion in wrestling history. Vacant has more titles than anybody.
I was going to say Vacant, if you add up all the titles, Vacant's got of everybody else that
Vacant's a hell of a wrestler, isn't he?
You will never, and that's the thing. You can't beat Vacant. He is literally
16-time. He's a 100-time champion.
Oh God. All right. So bringing us to our last segment of the night, which is, of course, the Mount Rushmore. And today's Mount Rushmore, as always, is based on our theme from today's show, which is the greatest of all time wrestlers. Now, I'm going to go first and get mine out of the way, since I am going to mark out to my favorite wrestler and just put him right up there. And my person that I believe that goes on Mount Rushmore as greatest of all time is The Rock. And for all the reasons that we've named, especially he meets all three criteria. He could work in the ring. Granted, as AJ said, you didn't see him in the crazy, bloody, beat up, killer matches. But when he was in the ring and when he was wrestling, he sold the shit out of things. He oversold a lot too at
he,
times.
He was the first person to oversell the stunner. Everybody else has tried, but he was still kind of the originator of that.
Yes, when you see him take a stunner and he falls backward, flips over, kicks the ropes, and like crushes his own face, not painfully, but looks like all contorted and shit. He definitely knew how to oversell and work. He could work a crowd like nobody's business. He fought Hogan in that one match and had the people behind him, and then by the time that match started, everybody was against him and everybody wanted Hogan to win that match, and he played it up. He became the villain real quick in that match.
I actually read something where they said the Rock actually did an interview and said about 8 minutes into that match, he I think he was calling it, and he told mid-match told Hogan, we're gonna switch it up. Like, so The Rock essentially was responsible for that. Like, in an interview, he said he's the one that said, we're going to switch this up. I'm going to play the heel. You're going to play the face. So,
yeah. And that just goes to show you too, in his career, based on where he was, he didn't give a shit about if he won the match, if he lost the match. He was willing to put people over. He was willing to make other people look good, because he could. He had that ability. As far as mic skills go, holy shit. I mean, we talked about in the last wrestling podcast that we did. He could just talk his ass off, and he came up with some of the funniest lines that I've ever heard in wrestling promos. Whether he was a good guy, he was a bad guy, he could just talk his ass off and really, once again, move the crowd in either direction that he wanted to, based on the kind of character that he was playing. And he had the look. Granted, when he was Rocky Maivia, not so much. His look was pretty.
It was an experiment. That one didn't work.
Yeah, and I mean, it made sense for what they were trying to do, trying to represent, High Chief Peter Maivia as well as his dad, Rocky Johnson. It made sense what they were trying to do. It just didn't work because it wasn't The Rock. It wasn't who he was.
A lot of the all-time greats, their first gimmick didn't necessarily work, whatever promotion they were in. So
yeah. So, but
he also debuts at a time where Stone Cold's starting to get hot, where the NWO has already taken over on the other channel. So his gimmick felt outdated too, and that being like the always smiling white meat baby face too. So
right, and when you openly admit that in interviews that I was the baby face and they're booing me, there's a problem, so he knew he needed to change it up. And that's shortly after that, I believe he joins the Nation of Domination, and from there it just took off and became something crazy.
His personality, the charisma came out from then on. The charisma was there, and it pretty much never went away.
Yeah. So The Rock, I feel, definitely needs to be on the Mount Rushmore for greatest of all time. So I'm going to kick it over to Darth Pat. Who were you putting up on Mount Rushmore today, sir?
Well, hopefully this isn't going to be stepping on Theo's toes in any way, because I know it's not going to be the pick for AJ, but I've got to go with Hogan.
No, it's not.
Don't say it with too much enthusiasm there, sir.
I really can't think of anything to say about him that we haven't said on previous podcasts. So,
yeah,
he was arguably the greatest babyface and the greatest heel of all time. I mean, so he was the one responsible for taking wrestling into like the mainstream in the 80s. And, I always bring up Jim Cornette. He had an interesting discussion about Hogan within the last couple of weeks or so, where he was kind of like evaluating Hogan's legacy. And he of course goes old school, because he goes like really old school. He's bringing up how Vern Gagne was a huge star because, back in Vern Gagne's prime, wrestling was on actual network television, not cable television, but network television. And he brought up like Jim Londos, which of course is going back to the 30s and 40s, saying, well, he drew like better than anybody else. And it's like, I really have no idea. I don't really know if it's fair to compare. I mean, he said, yeah, Hogan was great for like pay-per-view and everything, but I mean, that was brand new in Hogan's time. So it wasn't like you could compare Hogan selling pay-per-views to anybody from a past era, because there was no such thing, blah, blah, whatever. I mean, it's like, we know he was a great drawing card. We know that he brought fans in as a face. We know that when he finally realized that his shtick had worn thin, that he was willing to take a chance, because even as though his shtick was wearing thin, he did still have to take a big chance by becoming the bad guy after having been the way he was for so long. And, he was able to run with that and see how well that could, rejuvenate his career. And give him a second level. And I've rewatched a lot of those Nitros from the time the NWO formed through, I think it's about mid '97 is like the latest I got to. And it just is very, very easy to hate him, because even if you were a big Hulk Hogan fan like I was, and I was still always kind of rooting for him then, looking back on it now, it's like, yeah, he is like literally the biggest douchebag in the world. He is taking more shortcuts to keep his title than like Flair ever did when Flair was with the Horsemen, because for one thing, he had a bigger gang around him. So yeah, just, he obviously, again, he was never the greatest wrestler. Though I did recently find some YouTube clip where he was working a match, and I think it was in the early to mid '90s against the Great Muta in Japan. Yes. And he's doing freaking enziguris and shit. And it's like,
correct.
This is Hulk Hogan you never saw on American television, because he didn't have to do that stuff in America, or he was almost told not to. His ring work was more about, making it believe that the guy was going to stomp him, but then doing the big comeback. So he was a great ring psychologist in that sense. But I think even to this day, when you ask people about pro wrestling, well, maybe more so The Rock now, of course, because he's become a bigger movie star than Hulk Hogan ever was, but for a very, very long time. And I still think to this day, to a certain extent, if you ask people who don't know anything about pro wrestling, Hulk Hogan will be one of the first things that comes to their mind.
Oh, no doubt. Absolutely. Because he was a household name before there was such thing as a household name. No doubt about it. But
he's one of the original merchandise sellers too.
Yeah. Yep. And it's crazy because Hogan, as we know, was told probably by Vince, this is what I want you to do. And Hogan said, okay, I can do that. And then by the time he was in WCW, he was older, he was beat up, so he's not going to do any of the things that he was doing in, the overseas Japanese, wrestling promotions that he was doing. Why would he even try? There's no such or injuring himself.
Yeah, well, that was one of the interesting things that they said too, is that whenever he wrestled in Japan, he very rarely used the leg drop as a finisher. He used like other moves as a finisher. One, because Japanese audiences would never buy the leg drop as a finisher, though in that match against the Great Muta, I think he did end up resorting back to using it as a finish. But also because by not doing the leg drop, it was saving him wear and tear. Because think about, again, we all know that my atomic leg drop was by far the greatest atomic leg drop in the world. For those of you who have never seen our old wrestling, it was fucking terrible beyond belief.
But I don't know. I enjoyed it.
It was good from a comedy perspective.
But when you're doing that move all the time, you're constantly coming down, like, on your hip, on your leg, on your ass.
Yeah.
Obviously that's going to take a huge toll, and of course we can see with the problems that he's had that it did. So really, when you think about it, it's one of the dumbest finishing maneuvers ever, just because of the wear and tear that you put yourself through. There's like so many finishers you could do that won't do that. But I think even Austin has said that constantly doing the stunner caused a lot of like arm and shoulder problems eventually. So
yeah, it is. Wrestling beats the hell out of your body. AJ, who are you throwing up on the Mount Rushmore tonight?
I just want to make it clear, I definitely don't think Hogan should be.
We figured that.
So, yeah,
we know your feelings about Hogan, sir.
He only made my top 10 because of his character and that stuff. So he's a terrible wrestler. So
he's gonna have fun when I go next. Go ahead.
Uh-oh. All right, go ahead, AJ. Who you throwing up there, sir?
I'm Shawn Michaels. So.
Wow, you look excited about that one too. What the hell is with everybody looking so excited about their picks?
It's 1/4.
No, it's not.
Shawn Michaels. He's the best in-ring performer I've ever seen. So if you go look at a list of like the top 50 matches of all time, he's probably in 15 of them. So like he had 2 careers. So he had the career where he was an asshole and a dickhead to everybody, still put on some good matches. Then he went away, came back, and almost had a better tenure the second time around than he did the first time around. So he's had good matches with just about everybody. Anybody that got in the ring with him, other than Hogan, because they didn't like each other and he wouldn't sell for Hogan. So other than the Hogan match, There's not a lot of bad Shawn Michaels matches, really.
No.
Especially since he came back.
Yeah, and the 2 Undertaker matches that he had, phenomenal. Both matches were crazy.
Yeah, one of those is considered one of the top 5 matches of all time, generally. So,
so that's crazy.
I'm sorry, I was going to say the interesting thing I think is that even with as much like uncooperativeness as there was in that match, I think he and Hogan still had a better match for what Hogan was capable of doing in 2005 than by any rights they could have had or should have had.
Because so. Michaels and Flair and Bret Hart are probably the 3 best like in-ring generals of all time. They put people over. They know how to make people look good. They knew how to like call a match. I mean, I feel bad for anybody in WWE that had to follow Shawn Michaels in a gimmick match that he was in first. Good luck. So he set the bar pretty high in the ladder match, in the Iron Man match, in the Elimination Chamber, even in Hell in a Cell. He set the bar really high. Every time they threw out a gimmick match, they're like, we're going to put Shawn in this first because he's really good at all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. The only thing Shawn Michaels wasn't good at was he was an asshole for the beginning chunk of his career. He was a dick. And I know he was a dick. He was a dick. He threw his weight around. I've read all kinds of stuff about all the politics and the backstage crap that him and Triple H and Razor and all those guys were doing. It's crummy but he knew he was better than anybody else, even than Bret. He knew he was better than anybody else there, and he knew he could get away with stuff, and Vince couldn't get rid of him because he was better than everybody else there. Like Owen Hart, that's why I said in the first podcast, if Owen Hart would have not died, I think him and Shawn Michaels would have been really fun to watch when Michaels came back, because he was like way ahead of his time, just like Owen Hart was. These guys were doing stuff that nobody else was doing. That's why they put Michaels in the Iron Man match with Bret Hart, because there was nobody else for him to do that match with. They didn't have anybody else on their roster that they could have done that match with other than Bret Hart. Mm-hmm. So Michaels was really good at the in-ring stuff. That's why I'm picking him, because the in-ring stuff is the most important to me, and he's the best in-ring performer I have ever seen. I don't think we're ever going to see anybody who's better at that than he was. So,
good pick.
I would also just say that I really feel, and it's not totally because of his attitude, though in a lot of ways it is, that if he hadn't come back for the second half of his career, if you will, I don't think he'd be deserving of. I'm not even sure if he would be in my top 10, quite frankly. And it's largely because I wasn't watching WWE when he was in his prime and everything. But it was also because like the attitude stuff, that the fact that he wouldn't put people over, he'd always seem to find a way to vacate the belt rather than dropping to somebody.
I'm actually inclined to agree with you, Pat. I don't know if he was top 10 worthy until he came back and tore the house down with The Undertaker and Chris Jericho and Kurt Angle. I think that all that stuff helped justify him as one of the greatest in-ring guys ever.
Yeah, he did a lot of great stuff in the second half of his career. And, of course, the funny thing about it, too, is that except for that brief 1-month period there where he won the belt at the Elimination Chamber, throughout the entire span of that second half of his career, he never held the belt. I mean, they had the brief tag team title reign with Triple H, but he was never a champion throughout that. It was really more about just having feuds, helping to put other guys up to the second level to increase levels, whether it was Jericho or Angle or Edge or John Cena
He really was that guy that didn't need a belt. We say that about people all the time. He was like the epitome of that, I think, during that stretch where he really didn't need a belt, and it didn't fucking matter whether he had a belt or not.
Yeah.
All right. Theo, last but certainly not least, I'm interested to hear your pick for greatest of all time.
So am I.
I have a feeling, but let's see if I'm right.
This is hard for me because I already knew pretty much what you 3 guys were going to pick, which is fine. I was torn between these 2 guys, and I'm still torn right now before I pick.
I just want to say I'm glad you're okay with my pick. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, I'm fine with that. I think it's legitimate.
Yeah, your pick was good, Jeremy. You could have taken any 3 guys from any of those 3 guys from the Attitude Era, and I think you're fine.
So, the reason this is hard for me because They both did a lot in their career. Going with The Undertaker. It was between him and Flair. Him and Flair, they're like my 1A and 1B right now.
Wow, I really thought it was going to be Sting. I'm surprised.
I actually did think it was going to be The Undertaker.
You know, I mean, they both had great careers. They both pretty much stayed longer than they should have, of course. Most of them do. Yeah, it was challenging for me ever since we brought up this topic. Like, I knew Pat was going to pick Hogan. That's fine. Like, Hogan's probably like my number 3 on my list, probably, for the most part. I'm just going to go with Undertaker. Flair could be on there, too. People probably be mad 'cause I didn't pick Flair. It is what it is. I'm just going with Undertaker for this one. Long career. Did a lot of things. Had a lot of good matches as well. Some crazy shit that he's done. He's one of those gimmicks. Well, I know he was with WCW beforehand. But when he came with WWF at that time, his gimmick was very... it was just out there. It was very... I can't think of the word I'm looking for. You know, he had people at Survivor Series. Kids were a little scared of him coming out with the way his look, you know, the Undertaker, the guy of death and whatnot. But he's changed his gimmick a lot over the years with the biker. I kind of like his biker gimmick probably the most, even though I like the goth stuff, even though, you know, I like the Brood, even though they sucked. I like characters who have like the dark side. As much as I like Stinger, the Surfer Sting, I like the Crow Sting just as much, and sometimes just a little bit better as well. Besides the Surfer Sting, that's just me because I'm into vampires and all that shit. So those type of gimmicks, they draw to me more than for others. But I'm not gonna go too much into it. But you know, Undertaker is my he's 1A, Flair is my 1B. Yeah, but I'm just gonna go with Undertaker. It is what it is.
All right.
That's a better pick than Hogan, at least. So.
To some degree, yes, and to some degree, no. I can argue for Hogan in multiple ways.
I mean, I can like I said, I can argue with all you guys all night too. So I can argue against both of them all night. I'm not going to do it, but I can.
Yeah, we can.
To argue is okay. Just make sure you make a fucking point. That's all. All right. Yeah. So anyways, so let's recap our Mount Rushmore. On Mount Rushmore today, we have The Rock, Hulk Hogan, Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker. So, great. In my personal opinion, another great Mount Rushmore, whether you liked them, didn't like them, indifferent towards them, look like you're smelling shit from a mile away because you don't like Hogan.
No comment.
No comment. But anyways, it's another good Mount Rushmore. Well, and this show, guys, we all know it's all about our opinions and what we think. We don't always have to agree, and I don't think it's good that we always agree, because what the hell fun would that be if we agreed about every freaking topic anyways? So
it'd be boring.
Yes, it would be quite boring, and I think everybody would start tuning out if everybody's just like, yeah, that's great, yeah, I like that too. So that does bring us to the end of our show, and we just want to thank everybody, as always, for tuning in, watching, catching us wherever you are. We do appreciate it, and as we always do, we do this for fun. We do this for you guys. We do this for ourselves because, hey, if we weren't doing this, we don't know what the hell we'd be doing right now. Anyways, well, maybe sleeping because it is a little late on a Sunday evening. Pat would be jerking the gherkin, choking the chicken.
Oh, no, I was saying you'd be doing that.
He was saying you would be doing that.
Yeah,
quite possibly.
I'd be sleeping at this time right now if you guys didn't have me up here. So
he would have already been done jerking the gherkin and then sleep.
Falling asleep in the chair.
Hey, as long as you clean up after yourself, you're good.
That's right. Always clean up after yourself. Anyways,
hey,
so
what's our topic for next time?
Sports movies.
Sports movies. So catch us next week as we talk about sports movies. And boy, there are a fuck ton of those movies out there that we can talk about. And I'm sure that'll be a fun episode because, hey, all of us love sports movies, and especially Rudy. So it'll be a fun episode. Please tune in. We hope to see you guys. Well, not see you guys, but talk to you guys and spread some more fun and joy and entertainment. So until next time, we say peace, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.
Bye-bye.